My name is Stijn. I'm working as a BI consultant for about 2.5 years now at Easydash. Easydash is one of the sponsors of today. During that time, we have developed multiple KPI dashboards. And today, I want to show you the one which we think rules them all. And I want to do that by means of 3 questions. Why, what, and how. We start with, why is this the ultimate KPI dashboard? What is the reasoning behind it? How does it work? What does it offer? Which features, which options does it have? And finally, how do we do it? First, by looking at the structure, by manipulating the field parameters based on tabular editor. Who in here has experience with field parameters? All right, most of you. And with tabular editor? Okay. We will go into detail about field parameters. Tabular editor, not so much. We will go over that rather quickly. Then second, we will look at the input list. This dashboard is entirely based on input lists, which makes it able for you to set it up without any code whatsoever. And finally, the third point, I will show you how you can create basically an unlimited amount of measures, a number of measures, in practically no time, using scripts also in tabular editor. Okay, before we kick off, I quickly want to show you the dashboard so you have somewhat of an image. So this is the dashboard. At first glance, it's pretty straightforward. We got 6 visuals, 6 different KPIs. You got some actual value in the top left, a trend in the bottom, and some comparative values. And in the bottom, you have just the option to select a different page, and then you will get your next set of KPIs, which we have operating margin, ROE. And I know maybe you already noticed, these are all the same 6 visuals. And based on filter context, we're going to dynamically show KPIs in this report. And that may sound a little bit vague right now, but hopefully it will become more clear once we continue with the session. Okay, so why then? At our company, we experience a huge demand for KPI dashboards. It's the single most requested dashboard. So that gives us a lot of reason to do it in the best possible way, the most productive way. Because many times building a KPI dashboard can be expensive, time consuming. You need to build it from scratch each time, even though ultimately there are a lot of similarities between the different KPI dashboards you build for your customers. They're essentially doing the same thing. So we thought of a way to create a general framework, just one general template that you can basically apply on any customer you want. It's suitable for every organization. And then later on, from that base, you can customize it if necessary. So you can supplement it with extra pages, like a balance sheet or a cohort analysis, anything you like. And even though it's a general framework, it's a standard dashboard, it still feels flexible. You still have the idea that this dashboard is unique for that customer because there's a lot of variable inputs that you have to make it interactive. Okay, so to quickly summarize, what does this dashboard solve? Extracting and defining the data, those are still manual tasks. Those require human interaction. You yourself have to make a connection with a data source, get your data in, and once it's in, you need to define it. You know, when you have a KPI like revenue, you need to define revenue is the sum of this column. That is something that cannot be automated, that requires business logic and human interaction. All the steps after that can be automated. So creating the measures, we are going to automate that by using scripts. We will have, in this example, 120 KPIs. We're not going to manually create each measure for those KPIs, but we're going to use scripts. Not only for the base measure, but also for the variance of those measures like previous year, the difference between previous year and the actual targets, etc., etc. Those will all be automatically created. Defining the measures, that's the step before that. That is still manual. So we create it, but you still need to define it, of course. Then building the visualizations, because this is a completely generic view. These visualizations are already filled in, and they're all filled with field parameters, which have dynamic output based on filter context. So you don't have to create the visuals in any way. They're already there, and we're just going to load them in with data. We're going to create filter context, and they're displayed. We're not going to drag measures into it. We're not going to change the colors. That will all be automatically done. Bookmarks, again, because we work with filter context and create that dynamic output, we don't need bookmarks. The pages that you saw on the bottom, those are not bookmarks, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is just a slicer, and by changing the slicer selection, by changing the filter context, different output is being displayed. And that's a very powerful tool, because normally if you want to have different pages, you need to make static bookmarks for each page. And if you have a new KPI or you want a different view per user, whatever, you have a lot of bookmarks, and we don't need them at all in this setup. And finally, design and formatting. Every single element within this report, excluding slicer and the trend line, because you cannot conditionally format those, but all the other things are conditionally formatted. And that means that you can format it based on a measure, on an expression. And those are just generic expressions which refer to an input list. And in that input list, you indicate, I want to see this visual in green. I want to have the background in black. And you have like your input list. You just fill it in with all the color codes you want per item. And then you create your design and your format for your report. Okay, what can we do? Let's get more into practice. We start with actively change KPIs, colors, and accessibility. You already saw the changing between the KPIs by switching the page in the bottom. But the colors are also all automatically formatted. And to show you an example, we go to the last page, and the last page doesn't have enough KPIs to fully show this. So these positions are not relevant. There are no KPIs on this position for the 18th page. And with conditional formatting, we can make those visuals transparent. And now you have the feeling that you get this interactive feeling. And coming back to accessibility, we also have the options to put row-level security on this, because maybe not every user is allowed to see every KPI. And you also have the option to show different designs, different colors per user, to have a different kind of view. And I will give you a demonstration of that. Because this is just my account, Stijn at Easydash, I cannot show you the row-level security right now in practice, but I can mimic that behavior by just changing the slicer selection which you would use for your row-level security. So on this page, I have a filter called default username, and the username indicates which user is viewing the report. Let me go back to the first page. One second. Okay, so I'm going to edit it, and we're going back to this column, and right now it's default, and default is just the default user which is able to see everything. But if I select John, for example, and this is just a slicer selection that is being changed, we only have 2 pages left, because John is not allowed to see everything. And later on it will be clear how we do this, but this way, just by changing a slicer selection, we can create a whole different output, because also the positions of these KPIs are different. Right now we have executive customer lifetime value on the second place, and I'm not sure if that's also the case on default, for example. That may differ. Oh, it is the same, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same. And to look at Mary, for example, a different person, she doesn't like the white, she loves the black, she loves the dark mode, and just by changing a slicer selection, we get this entire different look and feel to the dashboard. And again, it's just conditional formatting on every single item in here. And based on different filter contexts, different color codes are being picked up by the report. So let me go back to the original one. Then we have the option to group your KPIs by subject. Like you saw before, we had like 18 pages or so in the report, which is a lot. And in the top right, you just have the option to select a single subject to which the KPIs are assigned. So in this case, I will select executive, for example, and I will only get the KPIs which are related to that subject. You will see I only have 3 pages right now in the bottom, and only the KPIs which relate to that. In the meantime, you saw some coloring changes. That is just a loading screen. This is the field parameter, and sometimes when I change the subjects, it's not that quick, but in general, it's pretty quick. And again, when I go to page 3, not everything might be relevant, and the irrelevant ones are just transparent. Okay, and assign your KPIs to different time intervals. Not every KPI might be relevant for each time interval. For example, financial KPIs like an OPEX or an EBITDA, those are generally on a monthly level and not on a daily level. So when I select my day view in my report, I don't want those KPIs to show because they're not relevant on that level. So you will see if I select a different interval within the dashboard. For example, now I'm on month, but I want to go to daily. Before we had 18 pages, but on a daily level, we only have 13. So there are a lot less KPIs which are relevant on a daily level compared to a monthly level. So again, that entire setup of the dashboard, what are we showing at which positions, has been changed. It's fully dynamic. And just for you to know, because you're on a daily level, you can select a single day in here, and you can compare that with a previous day. And where with month, you can select months and compare it with previous months, same month last year, etc. Okay, now compare KPIs with target and previous period. You already saw those. We have comparative values next to the KPIs. And then you can have a target next to it or a previous month. If you don't have a target, you will get that dash. And you can also assign colors to it in the colors input list. And keep in mind that some KPIs are not better when they're higher. For example, cost. If your costs are higher than your target, that's a bad thing. And in the KPI visual, you have that option high is good or high is bad, I think. But that is just then fixed to that visual, and we want to display different KPIs within that same visual. So instead of using that static high is good within the visual, we indicate within the KPI list, which is also an input list we will be using later on, whether a KPI is high or good. And based on that value, based on the filter context which is related to that KPI, we can then say, okay, if it is above the target and it is high and good, then it should be the good value, the good color. Otherwise, it should be the bad color. Show the trend of the KPI in a time interval of your choice. So here we are on a monthly level and we see months on the bottom. You have the option to select how many months you want. So right now I got 10, but I can also select 12. And we're on a monthly level and the trend is also in months, but that isn't necessary. You can also, for example, that is very common, when you want to select years, I also want to see the months on the intervals. When I select an entire year, I want the trend just to be in months, and that's also possible. So I've selected the annually right here, but still my trend is in number of months. You see in the bottom right here. That is something that we can set up also in an input list. You just indicate per interval in which interval you want to see the trend. Explain your KPIs through activating info pop-ups. We got an info pop-up in the right top, and if you hover over it, you will get some information about the KPI. You store this information in the KPI input list. Per KPI, you write information if you want to. If you don't write any information, there's nothing to show. These ones don't have an eye. Pay attention that this eye is right now here on position 1, but when I go to page 2, it will disappear because there is no info related for the revenue per customer. But that button, that info button, is still here. It's still the same visual. It's always the same visuals. Again, based on filter context, we show it or we don't show it. View your KPIs per self-chosen category. For example, country. That's the one that we're using in the demo. So, well, first of all, you have a table view. And in the table view, well, you just list all your KPIs. In this case, we got quite a lot. We have 120. So right now we're showcasing 120 KPIs simultaneously and the trend of it. In the country view, you can select one KPI and then have it distributed, divided over your countries on the left side. So accounts payable turnover or anything else. And this, because this is a field parameter, that's a new function, this slicer is dynamic. So right now I will only see the KPIs in here which are relevant for my filter context. If I change that to a different interval, for example, this will probably be more because there are more KPIs available on a monthly level. It will start always with select a KPI because you might have selected a KPI in the previous version which is not applicable in your new filter context. So it starts with select a KPI, which is always relevant, and then you get your new choices. All your KPI choices which are relevant in your filter context. And then, finally, we have the option to analyze your KPIs through a default analysis page. Every KPI in here, you have the option to analyze it. So you have the customer acquisition cost, and I can click on Analyze. And I will get an Analyze page for the customer acquisition cost, where I can select, in this case, months. Because I was in the month view previously, I can select months, anything I want. Just, for example, the previous month in January. And I want to compare that with months November and October. We have 120 KPIs. We have 5 intervals. Not every KPI is relevant for each interval, but in theory, we could have 600 different combinations of analyze pages. And in the back, this is just one page. One page, and based on the filter context, again, that filter context, we can create different output, unique output. Okay. How do we do it? Do you want to take a picture? Yeah? No problem. Okay. How do we set it up? That's probably the most interesting content for you. We start with a template file. And we got that template file, of course, we developed it, and that takes most of the time. It's initially a lot of work, but I will show you that this is an investment. If you do this, you build this, you can in the future really quickly create new content. And that is what we're going to do now. Within 30 minutes or so, we are going to create the dashboard that you just saw, the demo one. And keep in mind, like you saw before in the summary in that table, defining and extracting data, that is still manual tasks. So I will exclude that from this process. I will use just dummy data, so I have something to show. The graphs will be filled, but keep in mind that is not actual data. That is just dummy data just for you to have a picture. Once we have that template file, we are going to fill it with those input lists. We have 4 of them, and the file, the template, is going to use that as a source. It's going to be processed within the template file, and it's going to make it unique for your use case. Then, once we have done that, we will use some scripts, because once we have the KPIs, we also need the measures, and we don't want to manually create all the measures for 120 KPIs and the variance of it. So we will automatically do that using scripts. And once that's all done, we should have our dashboard. So, starting with the template file. The template file is pretty similar to the file you just saw before, but now it's just got no meaningful information in it. It just got dummy data in here, like KPI alpha, and also dummy data in here. And this is like your starting point. We're going to copy this file, start from here, and fill it up. And before we go to fill it up, I want to show you how it essentially works by explaining the combination between field parameters and tabular editor. So I have a file prepared, which is a very simple file. It's just to demonstrate how it works. Ja. Ja, ik weet niet wat het is.
Ik denk dat er best wel veel mensen zijn, komt iets op maximaal, die gaat de CO2 proberen.
Dat is wel belangrijk. Ja. Okay, so this is a very simple file. I got 5 calculations in here. KPI 1, which is just the value 1. KPI 2, which is the value 2. KPI 3, which is the value 3. And 4 and 5, which are values 4 and 5. Yeah. Okay, we're going to create a field parameter. For that, we go to modeling, new parameter, fields. And we're going to use our 5 KPIs. And we're going to create a slicer on this page. Right. There it is. I'm going to pick a card and I'm going to drag that field parameter I just created in here. And when I select KPI 1, my output will be the value 1. When I select KPI 2, my output will be the value 2. And this is what I mean by filter context. We have the filter context where we select a certain KPI in here. And based on that filter context, we have dynamic output. And this is a great tool. This is a great feature. The field parameter, there is just one slight hiccup, and that is that it creates a table on the back, which does this logic. But that table is a calculated table that has these like static rows. And if I want to add something in here, I need to just manually write it, and it's not very convenient. It's not what I want. And just to give you some context, so we put a parameter in here, KPI 1, and to that KPI 1 is related a field. In this case, a measure. It's the string, the location of that measure, and this string is being converted into the actual expression which gives us the value. But I want this table to come from my Power Query M. which I can easily manipulate. So we're going to do that. We're going to copy this table. We're going to transform data. And we're going to create it. Enter data, copy it here, and I will just call it table for now. Okay. And I'm going to load it in. Right. Well, and instead of the field parameter I created before, I'm just going to use my table, which I created in the Power Query EM. I'll put my parameter in here, and I will put my parameter in here. And this doesn't work. It will just say KPI1, which is that string that you're seeing here. But I don't want KPI1, I want this expression, which is related to it. But that doesn't work by default. That only works when it is a field parameter. And I want this behavior that the field parameter does, I want that to be applied on my table, which I can easily manipulate in Power Query EM. And we can do that using Tabular Editor. So, if you don't have Tabular Editor, or never heard of it before, they're actually here today. And you can download it. Oh. You can download it from this link. I put it in the PowerPoint. I'm going to open it. Once you have installed Tabular Editor, it will be part of your external tools tab right here. And you can open it from your Power BI report, and it will be automatically connected. Within Tabular Editor, we have more features than we have in just regular Power BI. We can see more things. We can see how this field parameter works. If I click on it, if I click on the parameter fields, which was this expression, this column, you will see that this column has a very specific property related to it. It's an extended property. And when I open that, you will see this. Parameter metadata, that's the name of it, and some kind of value. It's called value version 3 kind 2. You don't have to remember it. Well, you kind of have to remember it, because we're going to copy it and we're going to mimic this on our new table. There's just one slight hiccup. You can only apply this property on a calculated table. And our table is coming from import. We want that so we can easily manage it. So we have to make like an extra step, a step in the middle, which is very stupid and redundant, but it's the way it is. We have to create a calculated table, which I'll call table 2, which is equal to the original one. And this makes no sense, I know. It's just the other table. But the difference now is that this is a calculated table. And because this is a calculated table, I can put that logic of the field parameter, that extended property, I can apply it on it. And before that wasn't possible. So once we have that, it should show up in my model. And now we're just going to copy the behavior. So I'm going to open it again. Version 3 kind 2. Copy and go to my new table, to the fields, and you will see it doesn't have an extended property yet, and we're going to create it for it. Add, the name was parameter metadata, and this is the value of it. And we're going to click OK. One more thing, we're not actually using the parameter fields column within the report. We were using the parameter column because the parameter column is the column that has this. It has the nice names, and this has just this ugly expression string. So the idea is when I use the parameter column, I want the parameter fields column to be actually calculated. And that's a different step we need to make in Tabular Editor. It's a different property that is active. Once we go to the parameter column, you will see that this column is grouped by another column, one column here. And that one column is, of course, the parameter fields column. So every time I use the parameter column, the parameter fields column is also being calculated, which is what I want because that has that special behavior on it. So we will do the same thing for our table 2. Parameter, we're going to group it by our fields column. I'm going to click OK, and we're going to save it. And once it's saved, you will notice that our table 2 now has these question marks in front of it. And these question marks indicate that there is something special about these columns. There is a extended property active, and that tells us that it worked. So we're going to remove this one and remove this one, and we're going to put our new table in here, and we're going to put it in the slicer also. And you will see that it works exactly the same before using the default field parameter. And you're probably thinking, what is the point of all this? This is a very roundabout way. What do you want to do? Well, the only difference now is that no longer this dynamic output is based on this static table, this calculated column. It is coming from here. This is the source. It's our input table, which we can easily manipulate in the back. And that's exactly what we're going to do, because in our report, we're not directly filtering the KPI, which you can only do with your field parameter. You can only directly filter that KPI. What we're actually doing is we're selecting a page. We're looking at a position, we're looking at intervals, we're looking at different users, and based on that filter context, we create dynamic output. And that's what we're going to do right now. So we go back to transform data, and we're going to add those filters, add that context as variables within our table. So if we go to this table, I'm going to manipulate the source, and I will add extra variables in here. So I will add a variable position, and I will add a variable page. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and page 1, 1, 3. To load that in. And now, instead of directly filtering the KPIs in my slicer, I will filter the page as I do in the template file. Put page in here. And here, this KPI, I will add a position to it. This is a visual filter, and I will put it on position 1. I want this car to be related to position 1. And I'm going to copy it, and I want another one which is related to position 2. And if I select a different page now, you will see that the output also changes. When I select page 2, it's KPI 3 and 4. When I select page 1, it's KPIs 1 and 2, which matches with just the variables, the parameters that I gave to those KPIs. And when I select 3, you will get 5 and an error because there doesn't exist a KPI for page 3, position 2. So that one doesn't exist, and that's why you get an error. And this is essentially what we're doing in the dashboard, what we're doing right here. There are just visual filters on here. This top left one has position 1, the next one has position 2. That is the filter that is being applied on those specific visuals. We have a filter coming from here, which is the page. We got a filter, which is the interval. All different variables that create unique combinations, and related to a unique combination is a specific KPI. And that is the KPI that is dynamically being shown within the report. So that's the idea. Create dynamic output based on selected variables in the report. Then we move on to the input list, because in this example I showed you, I'm now manually creating combinations, manually creating a table from the source. I just wrote it in. But that is very inconvenient. You don't want to write down all the different combinations you have. We want to do that automatically, and we do that automatically based on the input list. The input lists are used as a basis on which the report is going to make one big combination table, all the combinations that you have. You're going to filter that table on the front end, and you're left with specific KPIs you want to express, these ones. So we have 4 different input lists. We have user settings. You saw that quickly before. We had a default user, we had John, we had Mary. We have a KPI input list, and that contains all our unique KPIs and the related attributes, like high is good, are they available on this interval, is this user allowed to see it. Color settings, which are on an object level, so you can set a color for each object, for the background, for the trend, for anything you want, for the values on the top left, but not only on object level, there's even a level deeper on user, because as you saw before, Mary had a dark mode and John had a white mode. And last item is the trend settings, where you indicate, okay, if I'm looking at a year level, do I want to see the months on the axis? If I'm looking on a month level, I also want to see the month on the axis. And when we're looking at a day level, I want to see dates on the trend, on the axis. So let's have a look at that. Close this one. Okay, so I already got a file ready, a file which is the copy of the template, but now it includes the specific input list I want to use. Okay. Go to transform data. All right. At the top, we have our 4 input tables in the folder input. So first of all, our users. The users are default, John, Mary, and we got the finance department, I think. Just to show to you, it doesn't necessarily have to be a person. It could also be a department. It could be anything you want. It's just a group. And related to that group is a user order, which is very important, and a logo and a user settings. And these are links to items, to images placed online. And because they're links, they can be dynamically outputted within the report. So there are actually these one, the logo on the top left, it's just a link, and this button here that we got on the right. And because it's links, you can, based on a user selection, it can be linked to different images, and you can have dynamic output, dynamic visuals, based on different users which view the report. Then we got our KPI table, which includes all our KPIs. We got the name of it. We got a KPI measure. This is going to be the measure that is going to be created for that specific KPI. We got the format of that measure. We got the subject to which it belongs. We got info. You see that some of them are blank. If they're blank, they're not being displayed in the report. We got high is good, which you saw before. If it's true, that means if it's above target, you're doing a good job. Green color, otherwise bad color if it's false. If it's available on target, not every KPI has a target. If it doesn't have a target, you will get that dash in the report if it's false. Not every KPI is available to show it for your category. For example, again, the financial KPIs like EBITDA and OPEX, those are most of the time not available on a country level. Our category is country. So you indicate false. And because it's false, within the report, that KPI will never be part of this list. You can never select that KPI on a category level because it doesn't make any sense. It's not applicable. And we got here the intervals. Is it available on a day? True or false? Is it available on week, month, etc. And here we got that user orders, which are very important because you see user order 1, which relates to John. John is number 1. And then you indicate for John, okay, is John allowed to see this KPI? Is he allowed to see this KPI? Indicated one by one. And right now, these are tables that are part of my source within Power BI, within the file. Preferably, this would be a table within your data warehouse or a table in Excel on a SharePoint. And then you can maintain it, manage it from there, make changes in there, just refresh your report, and it will be updated within this file. And you don't even need desktop on your machine. Just work from the input list you have in your data source. Then we have the colors. Here you will see all the different items that we have in the report. So a background, the value on the top left, the text of the header, the settings background, even some actions like the setting button when you hover over it, the setting button on default, the setting button when it is selected. And you indicate per item, per user, again on their order, which color code you want to see. So this means you will never have to edit a visual on the front end. You can all put it in the back end based on this table. And the last table is that input period table where for each interval you can select, you indicate, okay, what do you want to see on the axis? When we select year, I want to see month. When I select day, I want to see days. Well, once you've done this, once you have connected to your lists, you're going to load them in. And I've already done that. So we go back to the report. And then you will see a whole lot of errors. And that makes sense because we have KPIs. We have our 100 KPIs. But we don't yet have the measures for it. There is no customer satisfaction score measure yet. We have never built that. And that's the next step what we're going to do. Go to the presentation. So, to summarize, basically everyone can set this up. It are just easy lists which require no code. It's very intuitive. And those lists can be stored externally. And what I mean by that is outside of this Power BI file. Just store it in your data warehouse, store it in your Excel file on the SharePoint, and manage it from there. It can be managed from the one who is responsible for it, and he doesn't need to have any knowledge, any technical knowledge whatsoever about Power BI. Next step, last step, are the scripts. We're going to create 2 scripts, one for the base measures and one for the variance. I don't have enough time to go over this in detail. The scripts, I got them from the Tabular Editor website. You can find them there. These are just basic scripts. You can create scripts on a list. And the list that we got is just our KPI list. And then first we're going to create base measures and then all the variants of it, like previous year, previous month, differences between those, etc. So, back to the report. We make these scripts in Tabular Editor. And for scripting, you will need to go to advanced scripting right here. And I'm not going to give a session today about scripting. That's a whole different subject. So I'm just going to copy the scripts that I found online in here. I've saved them in my custom actions. So first, we're going to create KPIs from the list. And this will create the base measures, so the actual measure for each KPI and the target measure. And once I create that script, a new folder is created here called KPIs. We've got actual and target. And here we got all our measures from our list. So customer acquisition, executive, etc. And normally, then you would have to define these measures. That's a manual step. It's the sum of this column. It's the average of this, etc. We're not going to do that right now. I'll just have dummy data automatically filled in here, just for you to have something to work with, something to see as an end result. Well, and once we have this, we want to create the variance, and we want to create the variance based on the actual, because the previous year of the target, that doesn't make any sense. So I select only the actual, that is then my scope, and I will execute the next script just for those actual measures, which is the variance. And again, this is a script that you can find online. There's a lot of documentation in the link that's in the PowerPoint. I'm going to run that, and once I've run that, new folders will arise below. And this takes a little bit of time because we have 120 KPIs and we got like 20 or 30 variants. So if I take a look at the entire folder, you will see that I've created 3,500 measures in just 1 minute. I'm going to save that, which also is going to take a little bit of time, and I really wanted to do it based on a bigger KPI list, just to showcase how many measures you can create in basically no time, and also that the report will still perform and be quite fast, and you can create a lot of content in just this half hour we have now. So, just to summarize quickly, save a lot of time on tedious work, because creating measures, when you create it, you have that loading screen, you need to wait once it's done, define it, close it, you have the loading screen again. It's a lot of tedious work. That is now all being taken care of using these scripts. And I think it should be saved right now in my tabular editor. And once it's saved there, we still need to push the changes to the report. It is saved, change is saved. And right now you're seeing all these errors. I'm going to refresh this. And wow, it's refreshing. This will take a little bit of time. I'm going back to the slideshow. We should have a finished report. While I'm talking to you guys, I'm kind of building the tension, hopefully. And the calculations are all loading. That will take some time. We have 3,500. So once I come back, we should have the exact same report that I showed you in the beginning. So we have, in a moment, like 500 analysis pages. We have 120 KPIs. We have all these features that we just created, well, in just half an hour. And again, keep in mind, you will see information, but it doesn't make any sense. It's just dummy data. Of course, you still need to define it. That is not part of this process. Okay, so we're loading. Oh, no, you can see it. Okay. It's loading right now. This file got over 50 million rows. A lot of measures, like you saw. Again, just to showcase, it's very flexible. Its capacity is very high. You can do a lot of things with it. I try to get the most out of it. That takes some time to load, but it at the same time shows you the powers of this report. And there we have it, luckily. Yeah, this is exactly the same dashboard that I showed you at the beginning. We have our 6 KPIs, and we didn't do anything on the front end. I didn't touch this. I didn't touch any visuals. I never wrote these titles. Those titles are all generated automatically. When I go to page 2, those titles will change. We will have different values, and I never created bookmarks. I've never done anything. Everything is generated automatically. And also, the analyze pages that you see on the bottom, those should also work all by default. We have our subjects in the top right. Because we're working with a lot of data right now, and it's just all being loaded, this report is a bit slow. But as you saw on the server, once you uploaded it, it's really fast. It works perfectly fine. So as you see here, everything is automatically filled in. We got our intervals. We got our subjects, which are automatically filled in. And unfortunately, I cannot exactly show you how I do this in M, creating that table, because that's just too much to cover. But essentially, it works the same as you saw at the little demo. I create this framework. I create this combination table where I have all my KPIs and the different variables. And those variables are which page is this KPI related to, which position, or which interval. All those variables are, that table with those variables is automatically created based on these input lists, because these input lists essentially contain everything that I need to create my combination file. And just to show an analyze page for operating margin, for example. You'll see that we have the analysis of operating margin. I never wrote this text. I've never dragged any measures in here. It is all dynamically being outputted based on the filter context. All right. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your event. Thank you.